accepting to have this interview and giving us your time, and for all of the FMI newsletter members. This is so important for us, and your work is, leading the way for other early scholars and students. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate your efforts on work related to forced migration.
Thank you. So I would like to start with my first question, which is, can you tell us about your current work and how it connects to the field of forced migration?
Sure. My current work actually builds on what I've been doing since my time as an MSW intern, really. I did my internship at a refugee resettlement agency. That time, I realized that I want to work with this population because of the cultural background that I really enjoy working with, as well as the needs. That was a lot, so I really wanted to work on that population. And when it was time for my dissertation study, I studied Syrian refugees in the United States as well as in Turkey, which is my home country, and we have a very large refugee population. And then after I transitioned to my faculty position at University of Central Florida, I wanted to continue this work. And it was the time when the Muslim ban happened in 2017. So a lot of discrimination was going on against Muslim refugees. So I decided to study Muslim refugees in Central Florida, particularly their discrimination experiences as well as their psychosocial well-being. During those interviews and interactions, I kept hearing about how their children struggling, not only academically but also emotionally, socially. So that stayed with me, and I'm like, okay, I should, find some support to conduct that kind of research. And recently, thankfully, to our center at UCF, they funded my research, and currently I am looking at immigrant and refugee youth needs, particularly the groups that recently arrived, not last 5 years. So it is, I think, very critical time for us to identify their needs because they are the future, and we really need to invest in this population, and they can, become healthy adults and can really contribute to society. So that is my current project. We are going to use photovoice and group level assessment methodologies. Those both can be considered community-based participatory research. We really want to hear from youth. They are the experts of their own lives. So they will tell us what they need, what their struggles are, how we can help them not only at schools but also in their neighborhoods, in their communities. So that's our goal through this project. I also has done some work in Turkey with Syrian refugees as well as the survivors of earthquake that happened back in 2023. I think that was also a forced migration because people were forced to leave their hometowns to have safe place, housing, employment. So we conducted an intervention, particularly targeting women who has depression, anxiety symptoms, but we really created a group support group for them. And intervention we found effective, especially for highly stressed women. And also we use this intervention for Syrian refugees in Turkey. Of course, we adapted it culturally, and we have found it effective for that group too. We will continue to use that intervention. Now we are in the development of project again in Turkey. That's another project currently I'm working on. In terms of teaching, I am teaching social work with immigrants and refugees for undergraduate students, and I've been teaching this course quite a while. But this year, I have like 25 students sign up, and typically it was like 10, 15 students sign
Mm-hmm.
up for the course. So I'm very happy to see that interest. At least I think students wants to understand immigration and refugee policies in the United States and how they can be useful for this population when because you know when you work at a healthcare
Mm-hmm.
facility, social services, schools, eventually you are going to have a client has either maybe immigrant or refugee
Mm-hmm.
background,
Yeah.
so you really need to know how to work with this
Mm-hmm.
population. I think that also brings some attention for our students. That's yeah what I do in my teaching. Yeah, I think that's all for now.
Thank you so much. You've been doing such important work for
Thank you.
forcibly displaced people, not only in US but also in Turkey and so many other places.
Mhm.
So, thank you so much for that. And my next question is actually related with that. So you're doing these like different work with the and you're helping like so many community members from different communities. But what drives your passion for this work?
Mm. I think my passion comes from my own journey.
Mm-hmm.
I came to the United States as an immigrant, and I think my path to citizenship was straightforward, to be honest, compared to some other immigration
Mm-hmm.
status. But still, it took 10 years to get my citizenship. And of course, there were some moments of uncertainty that created a lot of stress
Mm-hmm.
for me. So when I think about refugees, on top of that, and again, mine was very straightforward. They had all these traumatic experience back in their home country. So it creates a lot of different layers for them. And I'm like, okay, I have some kind of power in this country, right? As a scholar,
Mm-hmm.
a Turkish American scholar, so I can use my voice for this population. And nowadays, unfortunately, given the political climate, this group, immigrants and refugees, are even more invisible. So, what can I do? I can use my voice through writing, through going to conferences, talk about my research, this population, recording this kind of videos. I think spreading the word. So that's my passion. How I can use my resources, my potential to help and be support for these people, for this population.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you've been, like doing such important work and leading the way for students and early scholars. And related with that, I have another question. So, considering current research and literature on forced migration, what gaps do you believe require further exploration?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question because I think about it a lot. How my work, our work, can be more helpful for immigrants and refugees. So when we look at like earlier
Mm,
research, what I mean by earlier, late 90s, maybe early 2000s, there's a lot of emphasis on diagnosis of PTSD
mm,
or traumatic experiences in their home country. I think we learn a lot from that literature, which told us what is not working for this
yeah.
population. Like Western models don't necessarily work for this population. Yes, that can give us some foundation to build our work on, but it's not enough.
Mm,
It's not meaningful. Also, the diagnosis of PTSD, very, very few
mm,
refugees actually get that diagnosis. So, I think we learn a lot from that early forced migration literature, especially mental health.
mm,
And today I see more emphasis on community-based participatory research,
mm,
which is great. Yes, that's what I think we should use
mm,
as researchers. But I think also there are some confusion about CBPR. I think it's beyond collaborating with a local agency. Yes, that's a part of CBPR, but we really need to have refugees and immigrants in every stage of research. And again, they are the experts. We should follow them. We should really listen to them. Instead of being that teacher position, they are the teachers and we should listen. I think we have that tendency as scholars, that we love talking about our work, but I think we need to learn how to hear, really hear what others say. In this case, refugees and immigrants. So I think refugees needs to be part of the project development, data collection, even data analysis. This is what we do in group level assessment. It brings all different stakeholders, refugees, teachers, social workers, policymakers, all together, and they really look at the issues and they spend time together for 5-6 hours and really look at the emerging themes and how, and at the end they come up with some action items and realistic action items. So that's something I think still I see as a gap in literature. A lot of emphasis on collaborating with organizations, but I think CVPR is beyond that. Also, there to be successful, I think in this work, in this field, you don't have to conduct like advanced level quantitative analysis. Yes, that's a part of research, but I think by itself it's not enough. And to be successful, to be prestigious, you don't have to do that. There are ways to make a more meaningful work, which includes, I think, definitely qualitative methodology. If there are resources, time, of course, mixed methodology is the best. I think when you're working with people different backgrounds. But there is also this kind of understanding qualitative methodology. Who uses that? Students, they don't have like confidence to use or to learn quantitative methodology. But it's not that easy actually, especially if you want to conduct a rigorous qualitative research. It requires a lot of skills, a lot of time to learn the methodology. So I really encourage early scholars, students to learn these skills. Because then you will get meaningful, culturally meaningful data, rich data. Of course, that requires a lot of time, I think. Be patient because qualitative methodology requires a lot of patience. So in research, especially in this field, is beyond quantitative methodology. Something early researchers should, I think, definitely put emphasis on. And regarding that, being patient when collecting data or when collecting data with this population, you need to build trust. And this trust requires a lot of time. Yes, in every, I think, research, that's what we say. Okay, you need to build relationship. But in this case, you really need to spend maybe months, even years to really make that connection to community. So when I was a PhD student in my first 2 years, I volunteered at a refugee resettlement agency in Buffalo. And when it was time for me to collect my data in my third year, I really didn't need to put extra effort to connect with community because community already welcomed me for data collection. I really spent time with them. I had a meal, laughed together, even cried together. So you really need to spend time and get their trust, otherwise they are not going to open their doors to you, or they will open it, but it will be very superficial conversation that you are going to have, and then I don't think it's a very meaningful data. being patient and investing time to build those connections, relationships is very, very critical. So I think this is the another suggestion I can give to early scholars.
Thank you so much for that. Hearing about experienced scholars like you and your recommendations for the gaps that should be addressed, or like your recommendations for early scholars and students, they're so valuable, especially for forced migration scholars who are just like starting in the field, like me. Like I'm inspired, and I'm sure that like students or early scholars like me will be inspired as well. Thank
Oh,
you so much
thank
for
you.
that.
Thank you, Zeynep. Actually, I'd like to add one more thing.
Yeah.
I think it's very important too. In our curriculum, we have a lot of emphasis again on Western theories, frameworks. Yes, they are helpful, but I think there is also so much that we can learn from scholars in global South. And in most cases, you go to these countries, maybe in Africa, Middle East, Latin America, um, you have that position that you are the expert because you come from global north. I think that's really, really wrong understanding. Unfortunately, we have in whole academia, and we can learn so much from scholars in global South. For example, I'm always amazed by Middle Eastern feminism when I read about that. I mean, feminists in Western world, I think, can learn so much from that and integrate their daily life. How that can be something they can use daily. So that's just a small example, but we really need to have open-minded, or we really need to be open-minded to learn from scholars from other parts of the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. This really like means like a lot for me, and I'm sure that it will mean a lot for our viewers as well. I have one last question, which is there a book related to forced migration? It could be a biography, a novel, or a textbook that you would recommend.
When I get these questions, I always give this book as a recommendation. It's not directly related to forced migration, but I think every social worker should read Carl Rogers on becoming a person because he really talks about client-centered approach, compassion, empathy, um, and how human connections, relationships are critical. And I think these concepts are really related to cultural humility, and that's what tool we have to learn when working with immigrants and refugees. So I think Carl Rogers gives us great foundation. So I highly encourage all social workers in our field or in other fields, Carl Rogers and On Becoming a Person. That's one book I really love, but he of course has so many other texts that we can read. In regards to forced migration, when I was a PhD student, I took an anthropology course as an elective, and my anthropology professor, she assigned us this Lost in Translation, I think, New Life in a New Language by Eva Hoffman. It was really eye-opening for me to read that book. It talks about how an adolescent, immigrant adolescent, navigate her way in a new society, in a new language, all identity crises, identity shifts she experiences. So I highly recommend that book to our audience. One movie I also want to share, I always use in my social work with an immigrants and refugees course, which is a Hollywood movie, but it has, of course, some cliches, but it's very, very, I think, helpful for students to understand what a refugee goes through. It's called The Good Lie. and it's about the lost boys of Sudan.
Mm.
It starts with Sudan, what they go through, and then they spend like about 20 years in a refugee camp, and then they come to the United States. And even the story starts from the airport when they arrive,
Mm.
and what kind of struggles they have, and there is a social worker who helps them. So I think it's a great movie. If anyone interested in refugee population, and faculty can use them in their classes to educate their students.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and you created this time to share with the with our viewers. Thank you.
Thank you so much.